Welcome everyone to the AirOps webinar. Glad to have you here. I'm Josh, content and SEO at AirOps, joined with Steve and Owen. Steve from SEO Notebook, Owen on the growth team here at AirOps. We're giving everyone a couple more minutes to filter in.
Glad to be here, guys. Excited to talk content refreshes with you guys.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe one pre-question, because I had it on the list, was just what's your favorite guitar?
It's got to be the Fender Starcaster 1976. So that's the only like real vintage guitar that I have, but I picked that one up a few months ago at a shop in Toronto because one of my favorite guitarists, Johnny Greenwood of Radiohead, plays one. So
Wow.
and I found a vintage 1976. So that's I don't know if everybody can see my Zoom, but that's that one right there. It's a hollow body Fender that was made for 4 years from 1976 to 1980. And that's an original. So yeah, I gotta say that's the most irreplaceable of all guitars.
Do you ever actually play it, or do you just
Of course.
leave it up there?
Oh yeah, no, I played it on the weekend. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. I've recently come into contact with someone here in New York City who works at the Met, the museum, and they are like in charge of like historic instruments, including guitars, as far as like the display collection and things. It's very fascinating for sure.
Yeah, this one's kind of a cult classic. They reissued it, I don't know, sometime in the 2010s. But the originals have like the better pickups and five pots, and they're just it's an original versus a reissue. So I was super stoked to see that available, and I just jumped on it without even playing it. I just bought it online, and then
That's awesome. Looks like our numbers are increasing here. Really glad to see everybody. We've got Michael from Dallas. Welcome. Welcome once again. I'm Josh. I'm in New York City. I'm with the AirOps team. Owen, head of growth. He's in Chicago. And Steve, you're in Toronto, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Oh, we have people from the Philippines joining. Must be later at night over there. Utah?
Welcome, guys. Hey, Jeff. I know Jeff. And Manny, I know as well. So yeah,
Awesome.
all my peeps are on the line right now.
Kiev, welcome. India, Istanbul, Chicago. Yeah, great. Great to see. Owen's cheered for Chicago.
There aren't too many of us left, so it's great to see you, Tyler.
More Canadians, Nova Scotia. Good international flavor. That's really, really cool to see. SEO goes, of course, across all languages for sure. Well, why don't we go ahead and jump in here a bit. So today, once again, I'm Josh. I'm head of content and SEO here at AirOps with Owen on the growth team, and then Steve from SEO Notebook and Notebook Agency. Glad to have you here, Steve.
Super excited to be here, Josh. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, today's topic, we're going to be talking about content workflows. So let's take a look at our agenda. So Steve is a leading SEO consultant. And again, from Notebook Agency, you can see some of the brands he's worked with down there: Owner, Tidely, FreshBooks. And then how I came to know Steve is from SEOnotebook.com, which I mean is an incredible and probably like the most tactical SEO newsletter out there. Like every single week, or how often it comes out, there's always a really good actionable tactic. I know a lot of people say that, but his is like really in the weeds for sure. So, and it's voted one of the 7 best marketing newsletters. Wow, that's incredible.
Thanks, Josh. It's definitely a passion project. Been running SEO Notebook weekly since 2019. So we're in our 6th year now.
Wow. And you have a new initiative, right? A new newsletter coming, is that correct?
Yeah. It's going to be AInotebook.com. So
Okay.
very similar to SEO Notebook. AI Notebook will focus on generative AI search and tactical strategies to rank in that. This is something that I've been doing for the better part of a year or two now, but like as things have evolved, obviously like things like deep research are less than a year old, but just reverse engineering that the same way that we do with Google. That'll be the focus of AI Notebook. So yeah, if you like SEO Notebook and you've gotten a lot of value out of that, and you want to prep yourself for what's ahead with generative AI search, highly recommend that you sign up for that. It's free, of course, and the URL again is ainotebook.com.
Yeah, that's awesome. Of course, that's a big topic for all of us SEOs and us at AirOps as well. So let's take a look at our agenda today. Really glad to have some past attendees with us from like Glassdoor, Superside, Etsy, Wix, and other great brands will be with us today. But our main topic for today is how do we do content refresh, especially since we have so much content. There's so many more tools that you can use today. So we're going to be talking about refreshing content. How do you test what you do? The blank page test, which is a oldie but goodie I dug out of the archives there, wanted to chat with you about. Search and discoverability, and then even optimizing all the way down to the sentence level. We also have a special workflow demo of how you can do a content refresh in AirOps too. So, and then we'll have a Q&A. So be sure and get your questions in. You can leave them in the chat or in the Q&A field there as well. So let's kick it off here. A lot of folks are wondering, like, how do I decide what needs to be refreshed and when, especially when you look at like a chart here on the right. You have all of these different stages. You publish, it grows, and then you kind of hit this peak, and then you're like, do I need to update it? It slipped from like 3 to 10. Is that still good? So what is kind of your framework, Steve, for walking through what content needs to be refreshed and when?
Well, we track all of our clients' performance through a data studio dashboard that has, our important pages being tracked. And if we see, important pages on a decline, the first thing to do is to dig in a little bit further and check to see, if average positions for specific keywords that matter to us have gone down. And if that's the case, then that's like, step number 2 would be to actually go to the SERPs and see, what has replaced, our rankings that have fallen, and what would the reasons for that be. Another tool that we use as well is Ahrefs, and looking at like the page updates to websites that are web pages, that have usurped us, pun intended, and then seeing whether or not it's been an actual content change that has let them benefit, or is this just a shuffling in the search results? But I think what we want to really do is make sure that there is something to improve. If we've already put tons of effort into a page recently, and we think we've given it 95% of all the bells and whistles, then maybe just best to leave that one for now, and let's see how the results pan out. But if there's obvious paths to improvement, we want to first take care of some quick wins. Things like, your title tag optimization, things like your first paragraph, making sure that that's well optimized and hooks the reader in, and then go forward with a larger refresh, depending on how much your competitors have changed.
Are you looking at like certain folders? Are you looking at certain topic clusters? Or are you just going in GSC and like picking out individual pages? Like, are you looking at it? How are you looking at it from that angle?
Yeah, so again, like in our data studio dashboards, that's got pages divided by subfolders. So if we have like a really clean campaign and we know that we're focused on a very specific subfolder, we can look at the overall progress of that. But I think when it comes to content refreshes, we are looking more at individual pages rather than everything, because even if you have a subfolder or a cluster, maybe only 10 to 15% of those pages are going to be real money makers for the site, and then the rest are going to be supporting. So I think it makes sense to look at things on a page level, and then when there are major updates or things that you think you can improve, then kind of going a little bit deeper on that after you've done those quick win improvements, like just improving the title tag and the CTR.
Right. And so if we do, once you kind of pick out those individual pages, like on the page level, you mentioned meta title, CTR, intro paragraph, anything else that you're kind of looking for there?
Yeah, well, we talked about a couple of things, with respect to headings, making sure those headings are descriptive and, have a logical flow to them. Another thing that I think we'll go a little more deep on is the structure of the sentences, how efficiently they're written for, Google to easily and quickly understand them. Are things a little bit too verbose? Obviously, we're creating the content at the agency, we try to take care of that stuff from day one. But if we're working with content that's pre-existing, sometimes tuning it up a little bit and making the writing a bit more compact and clear can also pay big dividends.
Are you looking for anything like expert quotes, research, stats, anything in that regard?
Yeah, definitely. Stats can be a great addition to that, or even just extra value that isn't on the other pages. I think one of the things that I've said for a very long time is, your page needs to a degree blend into what's on page one, but then what makes it stand out as well, right? So things like statistics that might not be there, expert quotes could be there, images to support your different stats and the different things you're talking about in that article. Unique images could also help differentiate you. So while you do want to kind of be homogenous to a degree, because that's that is what Google wants to rank,
Right.
it's important to give yourself some type of unique value. And in SEO Notebook, we've actually had a very popular note around information gain, where I suggested to actually search for your topic and then file type PDF, file type PowerPoint, file type Excel even, and try to find information on your topic that's not necessarily on another web page, but out there on the internet. And your competition is going to be a lot less likely to cite information from like a PDF or a PowerPoint than they are going to be just if everybody's Googling that and looking for the same stats. So that's a good way to differentiate your content and add some value that other sites are likely not going to have.
Is there a magic formula that you're looking for, like 60% similar, 40% net new, 70% similar, 30% net new, or is it just kind of more of a gut check on that per page?
I don't even think it's something that Google like specifically measures, like how much of your content is different. But I think what does matter is what the reader's impression is, right? Because likely that reader is reading a few different articles on the topic, and if your intro starts out like, we analyzed 267 different studies and this is what we found, like, and you have a unique angle to your content, then they're going to be a lot more hooked into reading your stuff versus just something that, everybody else is generally talking about.
Yeah, that's really good. I love what you said a little bit earlier. What makes it stand out? I mean, I think if you can ask that about like every page that you're kind of going through or trying to optimize and refresh, that's a good just kind of like question to think about.
Cool. And shout out to Manny in the comments, who I know is a notebooker who's implemented a lot of our stuff, and he always shares the wins with me. So love to see that you mentioned that information gain is working well in finance right now.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. I had some questions around this, like changing and testing your content. We just kind of put our site up here on from the SERP, but are you changing? Let's say we have a list where like we need our meta title to be improved. We need the intro paragraph to be improved. We need to add some images, research quotes. Are you doing this all at once, or are you kind of like phasing those changes in?
Well, I think like, nobody has infinite time, right? So that's one thing that we all struggle with is like, what can we do that is the highest impact, low effort, the path to least resistance to winning first. And then when that doesn't work, we go a little bit deeper, right? So, oftentimes a title tag refresh is, when I mentioned about, seeing that a ranking has dropped and then going to the first page of Google and seeing what other people have done, half the time when somebody's gone ahead of you, it's potentially due to just a simple title tag tweak and not a major content overall on their side. So I think you don't want to fall into a trap of spending hours upon hours of refreshing something that the path of least resistance might just be a title tag change at first. So doing, depending on how much work you have on your plate, what stage you're at in the campaign, all of those things, of course, factor into it. But, all things considered, I think the wisest thing to do is ask yourself, what are the quick win, high impact, low effort things that I can do to recover my rankings? And then, if you don't see the results from that, go forward with a more extensive refresh.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then any tips on how you're like testing this or having a control group and performance versus the changes that you've made?
Yeah, well, SEOtesting.com is a great tool. I have no affiliation with it, but that is a great tool for checking out the content decay over time, and then also annotating your improvements and seeing how things improve over time too. So that's a great tool that I recommend for that.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I haven't personally used that. I'll have to check that out. Let me go here. All right, here's something I dug out of one of your old notes or something. It's called the blank page test. And what I saw was this quote here I thought was very interesting. If this content were on a blank page, would it still be clear, useful, and complete? Meaning like outside of the SEO kind of world. Do you think this kind of still stands? Is this still a good test to use?
Yeah, so first I just want to give credit to the person who first published this, is Ian Lurie, Lurie. And he published this thing called the blank sheet of paper test. And essentially what it means is to get rid of like ambiguity that could exist, particularly with respect to a heading structure and of course a title tag as well. So that means like, let's say you only looked at like the headings to an article, and you saw an H2 that had like some either ambiguous meaning or just wasn't descriptive at all, was just like our top picks or something like that, right? You don't know like top picks for what, right? So you would say I want to put like our top CRM picks or our top HR tool picks or whatever. You'd want to be specific, and not just say something like our top picks, because when Google is scanning and understanding that content, if it leaves out that main keyword or the indication of what the topic focus is, our top picks doesn't really lend itself to solidifying that focus, right? So if you want to perform a blank sheet of paper refresh, what you'll essentially want to do is just look at your headings independent of any content that comes before or after it, and just make sure that your headings are descriptive. And if you showed them to somebody on a blank sheet of paper, that they would understand that it relates to the topic.
Yeah, that's really great because the context, you don't want to lose the context in your headers for sure. And you want to have, are you still seeing like keywords in the headers being important as far as refresh goes or Google SERPs?
I mean, I don't want to overdo it. Certainly, I don't want every heading to be like, CRM software and like literally every other heading. But, there's always things like variations, connecting like a logical flow, like, so I do want my headings to be descriptive, and I don't think that you would get penalized for that, but I think there is a careful way to do that.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. One thing we wanted to note is that we do have some refresh strategy sessions with AirOps. And so these are some workflows that you can use for high quality content refreshes. You'll also see how to use your brand and your unique voice, and then also some examples of what other companies have achieved as well. So feel free to scan the QR code, or you can email us at team@airops.com to set up your strategy session and learn more about how to refresh with AirOps.
Gonna do that right now. I can get one for you guys after.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, kind of moving on here a bit. One thing you shared in a recent note was this about Google Search Console. I really like this quote. My guiding principle is simple. This is Steve writing this. Double down on what's already working before getting sidetracked by less promising areas. So yeah, how does that kind of apply?
Yeah, so I think the example that I think is maybe one of the easiest to illustrate here is like, let's say you had a site that talked about, different stocks on it, like it was a finance website, and you covered, like let's say the Magnificent Seven stocks, and you realized that Google was for some reason really loving what you wrote about NVIDIA, like your NVIDIA content was just outperforming all of your other content with respect to Apple and other stocks in that group, Google, Alphabet, etc. And if you notice that Google likes you for a particular topic on your website, and obviously like that topic has to align with the goals of your website, of course, but if you see like a particular area that's doing well, like for example writing about NVIDIA stocks, with those getting higher clicks and impressions in comparison to your other content that wrote about different stocks, then it makes sense to double down on that, what that indication that Google is telling you, hey, we like what you're writing about this, just do more of that, right? So I think that also could apply to like verticals that you may address on your website. Like if you if you're a invoicing software that services freelancers, graphic designers, contractors, whatever, and for some reason you notice that your stuff around freelancers was a really popular topic for you, and that you typically ranked well for freelancer stuff, it would make more sense to go down that road versus other topics like contractors, let's say, that it didn't think you were as authoritative for.
Yeah, so you could kind of see if you have some related pages as well that maybe you could like fit into that topic to refresh.
Yeah,
to make
yeah,
it align
you
for
could definitely like refresh the stuff that you've done, or even I know this focuses on refresh, but publishing new content in that same category, and then refreshing it at a later date would probably make a lot of sense.
that. Yeah. Here's kind of a chart about like some of the benefits of refreshing content. This is from serpstat.com. A lot of different things here about why you should refresh and kind of the value of it. Are you seeing what factors are you seeing that maybe has the biggest difference in discoverability and rankings in regards to content refresh?
I think in cases where we've taken on clients and the content is not once performed and now is not, or in cases especially where it's never quite been to the mark, it often has a lot to do with how that content is written, it being too verbose, a reader struggling to get through it because the writing is not engaging, it's not clear, it's not straightforward, it's not scannable. So I think when you can find instances where you've got a piece of content that never quite did what it was meant to do, and when you read it you realize, hey, the intro paragraph, there's nothing hooking you in, some of these sentences are way too long, and there's a lot of fluff. Typically, like removing that fluff and making the meaning super compact, and we'll get into some stuff about dependency hops within words and how that works as well. I think that's when you see some major improvements, but that at the same time is quite intensive, I would say, to rewrite an article almost fully. But yeah, AirOps provides a great service, with being able to scale similar, content refresh processes over many articles. So it's really useful for that. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to ask you about, because I like using AirOps for this, is internal linking. And your Excel spreadsheet from like, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, where you had like all the different nodes and connections on internal linking, has been something that I've always used. Is that something you're looking for as well when you're doing content refreshes?
Yeah, I think that is typically, like, we actually have our internal linking processes done like separately, but I mean, you
Okay.
could very much consider that a content refresh, just, not on page word changes. But yeah, if you're looking, like, let's just take, that nuance out of it, and you're looking to improve a page that's lost rankings, I think, taking a look at what other content there is on your site and figuring out, can we drive some internal links to that, especially if those initial pages have backlinks to them and they're relevant but not linking to the page that you want to boost up. That's a really good way to perform a refresh technically. And then another thing that, just a very quick win, if you're not doing this, but if you've got a blog or a few blogs on your site that generate revenue for you, and you're not featuring those on your homepage, you should definitely create a small section of your homepage that has some really important blogs linking out from it, because typically your homepage is one of those pages that has the most links on your website 95% of the time. And if you can funnel some of that link equity from the homepage into your blogs, I mean, you could consider that one step in your refresh process as well.
Yeah, yeah, great tip there for sure. And now, something I hadn't thought a lot about until I was doing some research on this for this talk is optimizing at the sentence level. So I'll let you go ahead and take this away. I don't think a lot of folks are talking about this as far as from an SEO perspective. So why don't you talk more about what it means to optimize at this level?
Sure. So, words have their individual meanings, but words, when assembled together, give each other meanings, right? So in this example, we're not talking about the temperature outside. You're talking about the temperature for cooked chicken, right? So those two, that noun and that those two nouns, temperature and chicken, are linked in this sentence to give it meaning, right? But if you have too much distance between that, if you're like, my favorite temperature for my favorite family meal, which is chicken, is blah, 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 like that creates too much space between those words that give each other meaning. And when you're talking about, how a search engine interprets words, it costs money to process all of this and to link the two nouns that give each other meaning, for example. And if you have too many words in between that, it's actually more expensive for Google to make sense of what you're doing and of what you're saying. And in some cases, it might not get that meaning the way that you're intending to do that, right? So basically, I created a GPT called Snippet Brain. If you go to snippetbrain.com, it'll redirect to the GPT right now, maybe a tool in the future. But right now, if you go to snippetbrain.com, it'll redirect you to a GPT. And that GPT is designed to write sentences that are compact like this and reduce the dependency hops between words. And then the net result is an answer that's optimized for the featured snippet, and just also really optimized for the way that Google will be able to easily understand and process the meaning of those sentences, right? So when you're talking about, especially doing this on the site level, you're actually, Google loves this because it, will be able to crawl your content and make sense of it, more quickly, cheaper, and it's going to reward you for that. So this is definitely a big part of all new content that we produce, to have it, be in line with Snippet Brain. And of course, we don't just say, Snippet Brain, write me an article, and just leave it. We do put human attention towards that. But as a first pass, we really do want to structure our answers in the declarative fashion of Snippet Brain. And what we've noticed is that, from 40 to 60% of the time, those snippets get one just by generating your answer with Snippet Brain. So that's a prompt that I worked on quite hard. And the actual GPT itself now has over 10,000 chats with it. So there's people using it every day, which is just fantastic to see. And it really, when you run it, you will see how it actually reduces the hops between those words and makes those answers more succinct.
Do you recommend like running a whole article through this or just like certain parts? I mean, I'm just trying to think like if I hand off a brief to a writer, you know, they're not necessarily gonna be able to write in all declarative sentences, for instance.
Yeah, I would focus on the questions that matter most to you.
Okay.
This, another part of refreshing for us is really looking at which featured snippets are in contention that you're not winning, right? So if you're ranking, our typical rule of thumb is that if you're ranking 7 and above, that means, if you're in the top 7 but not getting that featured snippet, if you optimize your sentence, on a snippet brain type of approach, that we oftentimes get that featured snippet. So I wouldn't like need to write your whole article in that style, but when it comes to answering specific questions, we do prefer them to be like that.
Yeah. I like that top 7 because really it's nowadays the top 7 results are showing, not the top 10, like back in the old days on the Google search
True,
results.
very true. But I think also like if you're on page 2 and even if you write the perfect featured snippet, there's probably other things in your article that are, prohibiting it from being in that on that page 1 in that top 7 that you probably need to work on before you start considering, seizing those snippets.
Yeah, for sure. Related to that is hot topic, of course. AI overviews are kind of functioning in some ways as a snippet. Any suggestions that you maybe have about optimizing or refreshing for AIOs in particular?
Yeah, snippet brain is a great way to do it. Manny, again, in the comments, I see he says, I personally won multiple AIOs / featured snippets with snippet brain. We're experiencing the same thing. I think when it comes to AI understanding the meaning of your content, the more compact, efficient, and fewer hops that you can include, the more likely it's going to be to cite your resource, right? So, I mean, as large and rich of a company as Google is, they still have to think about, processing the most easy to understand information and surfacing that more often because, it adds up when they're generating, billions of AIOs potentially on a daily basis, right? So they want to pull that information from information that it can easily process and understand. And when we're talking about, even in ChatGPT, there's something that I'll be talking about on AI Notebook called text fragments. And when you run a deep research, and this is just a little preview for the folks who are on the call here, but if you run a preview in deep research and you click on one of those results, ChatGPT appends a little hash tilde text, and it actually shows you which portion of the page it extracted that information from. And that is portion of that page is the part of that page that answers that question in a very succinct and easy to understand fashion. So when you're talking about either Google AIOs or ChatGPT and what it wants to pull from your page, doing so in a manner that's compact and efficient is a way to please the bot.
Yeah, compact and efficiency. I like that. Next, we're going to be talking about how to use AirOps for refreshing content. So we kind of have a brief overview slide here. Owen, do you want to chat about this slide?
Yeah. Do you want me to share actually, Josh, and I can run through it?
Yeah, that would be great.
And then replace. So let's go for it. I think I'm good. You can all see my Google slide. I believe so. Okay. Maybe I'll start with another question for you, Steve. Do you want to give a bit of background to BrainStation? Because this is what me and Nathan started with for our little proof of concept content refresh workflow.
Sure. So yeah, BrainStation is a company that we've worked with a couple times now over the last 4 years at Notebook Agency. It's an ed tech company that offers courses and things like data science, product management, and typically skills that you can't study at a college or university. So we've worked on this site in 2020 initially with a section called Career Guides, and then also more recently working with this site again.
Yeah, it's an amazing site, high domain authority, and working with Nathan, who's on Steve's team, we put together an outline of a workflow. We wanted to see what could we almost proof of concept inside a couple of days for content refresh, and we started off with an outline of basically we want to go from a URL given to some page that can get updated, be human reviewed, and then published to the CMS. So essentially what we call this is content engineering, but it doesn't mean having to do too much in code. It doesn't mean having to do anything in any programming language. It's more, can we establish the right processes that, just like Steve went through on a bunch of different examples, like can we establish the right process that we want to follow to perform this end-to-end content refresh? So I'll give a really quick run through of a couple of points here in the process, and then I'll get into the actual meat and potatoes, which I know folks in the comments wanted to see. But we start off here with pulling a live URL, and then be it scraping HTML or Markdown, we aim to come out with an understanding of the metadata, some of the structure of the page, and then a clean version of the content. What we do then is green kind of signifies there's AI behind the scenes, but we try to like extract the main message, the theme, and then what's the goal for the reader of this article. I put a little star here because actually as Steve went through his slides, he had like very relevant points for each of these. But when you want to refresh content, maybe you're at a brand and you have product data or you have sales data or you have some other first party data that you want to now refresh your content with after X months or X years, that's going to be really important for you to include here over what I do, which is third party external research data. And then this next point, again, when we go to rewrite it, there's no point in rewriting it in what GPT is trained on, because that isn't going to sound like you. It's not going to sound like the rest of the content that you've invested in. So where we dynamically, in our example, create a writing and style guide on the fly, with AirOps, you can push in your tone of voice, your brand style guide, your writing style guide as well. So just two things here, I think, for creating winning content, as Josh called it. You'll want to make sure that you add in your own data points and then drop in your own like writing style guide and tone of voice. So once all of those are assembled, we then start to draft how we want the we're going from like an article here, and we want to refresh it with, for BrainStation as the example, how different jobs have changed with respect to AI. So we'll take a designer, now they're using like Figma with AI features, taking the different research we've done and their style guides, we're honing that into the topics that are now relevant to BrainStation and application for AI to that job. After we do that, we go over each topic in a little bit more detail. We make sure that we have all of the relevant details, and we make sure that it's brand aligned. We aggregate it all together. We then look at, just as Steve went through, the meta info and like technical and schema information. We make sure that looks good, and then we incorporate it all into the final article ready for review. So basically we go from a page that gets fully researched to generate the technical SEO behind it and the refreshed content that's human reviewed, and you can publish it to the CMS. So there's a lot of talk.
Interrupt for 1 sec,
Yeah.
Ian. You know, when discussing an approach that we could use AirOps for, and that, you know, specifically related to one of the client projects, the idea was, you know, if you were BrainStation and you had an article on like a resume cover letter, like what is the good in having an article on writing a cover letter that doesn't mention AI or ChatGPT in 2025, right? And since we published these pages, you know, back in 2020, that obviously wasn't part of the conversation then, but to go through that content at a later date and in an efficient manner to say, how has AI changed the landscape of this thing? It enables us to make our content a lot more relevant for today's searcher and today's reader versus an older article that performs well but doesn't have that up-to-date information.
Totally. And I think like relevancy is the point you called out there. That's like super important to consider. So kind of just jumping in behind the scenes, you'll have seen exactly as Steve went through some of the like core points that we care about, pulling out the content, and you'll see it here in Markdown. We'll have this page, top 7 reasons to learn at BrainStation. This is like what we'll start with. We want to enrich this. We'll pull out the metadata. So just like we went through in the slides, maybe a title tag update is going to be enough, but we need to pull all of the context to begin with. Well, then like analyze it. So again, Steve gave a great example of like a resume builder. Now you're going to want to use GPT to write your cover letter or do extra research on the company. But we'll first research what this blog post that we're talking about is actually covering. So in this case, we outline the main topic and the reader goal. And then what we do is we come up with research insights. So just like that example of if it's a resume builder, here we're going to go off and use Perplexity deep research to find more information on this core topic. So what we're doing is we're passing it the main topic of the article. It'll go off, it'll find core points for us to go deeper on. So in this case, it's about community support. There's this launch of like a new product with AI and ML features. And then the part I really want to call out is on the fly, we are generating BrainStation's content style guide. If you're at a brand or if you're at an agency that works with many, many different customers, this is something that you should like pull from your knowledge base. It'll be defined by your content team. And just like I put a little star beside it here, something that you should have as like a core document that you just pull into all of your workflows. So we'll start to write the suggested changes for each. And then for each individual topic, again, we might want to be able to pull from product data or sales data, or for Steve's example there, maybe we have stuff from our HR team of how they found like ideal candidates coming through and what their best practices are. So for each topic, we've had a Perplexity outline. We then iterate over it. That just means going a little bit deeper. We take each topic, we do further research on it, we format it as we want to inject it and amalgamate it back into our core content. But this could equally be searching in call transcripts. It could be searching your website for more recent information that you've published. And I loved something Josh touched on earlier, which was internal linking. Like maybe you want this workflow not to do any more like edits or updates, but it should just find content that you have that talks about relevant material coming up in this blog post, grab the URL and insert it. Again, this general sort of structure will help you facilitate that. At the very end, and then I'll kind of show you a live example. We take all of our updates. So now that we've done more research on all of these subtopics, we start to amalgamate it. We want to update part of our metadata, which is the refresh date, and we will reassemble our full blog, and then it'll enter human review step. So what that actually looks like if you were to run it in more scale, and content refresh is one of those things I know from my own experience that you always put on the back burner. It's probably one of the most important things you can do, but it's not as hot as writing like net new content. But in this case, we'll say here, I'll pick a random one, but 5 rules for startups. This is a live blog post they have. What the content comparison feature will let you do is you can see here that it will give you the delta between what's changed. So you're not just rewriting something and publishing it straight to your CMS. You're asking someone to come in here and maybe dangerously accept all changes, but really like piece through and make sure that everything is accurate and to your standard. So again, I'll kind of harp back to what Steve said earlier, but if you have unique data, or maybe you have newer, fresher links that you want to include. Here we're pulling like third-party data via Perplexity, but in this case, maybe around sales cures all, which is the core point they're making here. Maybe you have data from your transcripts you want to include. That again is possible, but yeah, very clearly you can kind of go through, start to tweak the content as you want. And then once you're happy with it, you can start to accept changes. And then I don't have it done here, but you can add your CMS column and then send it off to your CMS. But I'm sure there's a few questions that came in, but this is something I had gone through pretty quickly with Nathan, Steve, but maybe taking one step back from it, before content would land here, how would you start to filter content down if you're tackling BrainStation's domain as to what is in need of refresh? Are there sources you would go to? Are there criteria you would look at before you would bring anything into like a refresh workflow?
Yeah, I think it just all depends on what the client's goals are, right? So if it's not one of these blogs and it's something, related to a certificate that they're offering that is, of high value to them, and they're looking to fill seats, really just listening to the client and seeing what it is that they need.
Got it. I like that. And then when you go to like refresh content, we mentioned like maybe updating like the meta information. Is there any maybe what are your 3 best practices for people when they should be thinking about like what sort of content or schema to include on those pages?
I think just anything that, taking a look at what other sites are talking about, what unique value that you can add, just like we talked about at the top of this webinar, what is going to differentiate you from your competitors, right? And make your article stand out and be the last click in that searcher's journey. In terms of schema, I like to focus on schema that is visible on the SERP, particularly. So if you have options to, add review schema or stuff like that, then I would go for that.
Yeah,
Love
that's
it.
great. You'll notice here on that screen, you can reject or accept different changes, and that includes, like, as you kind of go through, I think that's really helpful as you're deciding, and also even like rewrite it with your editorial eye in mind. And then, you can choose on this, for instance, we were talking about title tags at the top. You can choose just to like update your title tags with a workflow like this. So there's lots of different elements to pick and choose to refresh. So yeah.
Yeah, just to answer Andrea's comment, which was how do editorial teams feel about this? Have you worked with teams that are resistant to the level of automation here? Absolutely. Even internally, there's aspects of this that we will use. We haven't everything built out internally ourselves, but amongst customers, we have publishers who really want to go from a core concept to a brief, and then they want to take their human manpower to finish that brief off to like a finished article. We have other companies who've put in tons of time and effort into improving their workflows, where they really have their style guide, their data, their product understanding really honed in. And they're super confident in having humans in the loop at key moments where the system is making decisions. And then also at the final step, just as Josh went through, where they're getting it to a 9 out of 10. And then they have their lead editor come in, accept, reject, make tweaks, and then have final decision over what gets shipped. So it really depends on where you are in your content operations journey. If you're like very much established, maybe there's snippets of it that you want to start like handing off to a workflow builder like this. And then we have other more junior companies who are trying to do like 0 to 1 really quickly and then try to improve their workflow over time. So they're trying to be AI first from the beginning and then optimize their workflow to move faster and then in the end create really winning content.
Maybe more broadly, Steve, how are you talking to clients and teams about, AI content or AI automations? Because I know you have obviously several GPTs yourself.
Yeah, I think it's a nuanced subject for sure. I think the bad rep that AI content has gotten is for the people who've just used it as like an easy button. literally have seen people say to ChatGPT, write me an article that will rank on Google and then go publish it on your website. Obviously, we don't condone that like whatsoever. But all of our content that we produce for clients always goes through a round of human editing. I think that is like 100% needs to be done still. If you take shortcuts, you're gonna probably have to pay for that one day. But the type of shortcut that we're showing on the screen today is the shortcut that literally just saves you the time that is not thought work, that's like piecing all together everything, and then it enables you to spend more time on the thought work. So I think that's where if you're talking about saving time and being more efficient, it's don't just say write me an article that will rank on Google, and save the time you're saving is literally like the brain power that you want to put into your content. Save the admin time that it takes to set all this stuff up, and then really 90% of your work on this is brain power, right? So
Yeah.
I think when AI content gets a bad rap, it's probably due to the people that treat it like the easy button, and aren't are just going for the quick wins with a churn and burn site, or even in some cases, unfortunately, established sites biting off more than they can chew with this. I think you just have, like with any decision in SEO or otherwise, you have to use your common sense, and make sure that the process and the workflow that you put in place has those checks and balances, but is aided by AI.
Yeah, great points for sure.
Totally. I think just like summarizing what Steve said there, and I'm adding one more point, grounded in data, I think is really important. It's what Elise brought up as a question, which is bring your knowledge. Like there's only so much you can find externally. There's even less that an LLM out of the box will give you. So grounded in your data, I think grounded in strategy, like working with the guys over at the SEO Notebook just to proof of concept this, and then I help build it. Like Nathan was coming with, here are our core principles for content that performs really well in SEO. Here's the little tips and tricks that we have for ranking an AI overview. So you do not want to lose that. And if you just go to GPT and try and generate content, it's not going to know any of that context. Like really what you want to do is start with your base principles, build up your process, and then start to codify what you're comfortable with. So I think that in the end will lead to content that a human can then review and that you can be a lot happier with.
Yeah, it has to pass that human test, right? It can't, like somebody has to read this and put themselves in the shoes of a user who's looking to answer those questions, and legitimately ask, like, is this article doing a good job? Is it scannable? Does it get to the point? Does it answer the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth question a person might have after reading that? Use these workflows to your advantage to cut down on all the research and compiling time and all that kind of stuff, but never neglect that final, human litmus test, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
for sure. I mean, tools like AirOps really help on that like pre-production area, I would say, where you can like save a lot of time, and you can also still invest on that editorial and writing side if you choose to. It just helps you get there a little bit faster. Speaking of some people using AirOps, here's some examples of a few companies. Winley, for example, is a telemedicine company for allergies. They've had a 28% increase in customers from organic channels. Toys R Us uses us for some of their product pages. They've had a 30% year-over-year increase in organic traffic. And Anne Klein is a fashion retailer. They've really increased their publication speed. It's been good to see them increase their production time and being able to get things live. So there's just some great case studies that you can look at on our site. But if you want to learn more too, you can also schedule a strategy session with someone on our team. I believe we have a few of those left. Is that correct? Yeah, there's the QR code. You'll learn more about these workflows, how you can definitely implement them, how to include your own brand voice and style guide. So yeah, click the QR code and definitely sign up. Got a few more to go here for questions. We got a little bit of time here. So I do have some questions that have come in, but we're going to chat some more about content refreshes here. One question that came in via email before, this is from Lauren Finero at Freed. She's done some great work at Scribe as well. She asked, do you have a regular cadence that you go in, like every quarter, every week, to look at updating content, or are you just purely going off GSC and some of those triggers?
Well, I think for us, like it's just about knowing which pages are most important on the website and monitoring the performance of those pages. So when we meet with clients, we review our Data Studio dashboards that have all those important pages with their own reporting. And we will look at like things like how often are we building links to these pages, when was the last time we updated it. But if there, I think there's the old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, is certainly true. And that means that we're not going to just go and do a refresh for refresh's sake. So while they're I would say in a perfect ideal world, we are updating every article at least once a year. I think realistically it comes down to, is the page important and is it performing? And then if the answer is yes, but no, it's not performing, then go and perform the refresh at that initial like quick wins, high impact, low effort, and then going deeper if that doesn't work.
Yeah, that's a great tip. One other one that came up here was about cannibalization. Are you thinking about that in kind of the refresh process? Like maybe two pages are keeping each other down and you need to combine or get rid of one of them?
Well, I mean, that's sometimes two pages can rank on the same SERP. So
Sure.
cannibalization is a tricky one, but if you go into Google Search Console and you look at one keyword and you've got a very even split of clicks and impressions for a page, and then you go and look at the SERP and only one of those pages is showing, I think that's a good indication that there is cannibalization. So I would probably look at, if you had a decision to make between those two pages, which page has the best engagement. So you could look at an easy metric like time on site and figure out, even from your own eyeball test, which page you like better. Then take that, content, consolidate it into one page, redirect, and then of course go and change all the internal links to the other page and all the little SEO things you have to think about when you have that knowledge. But if you have two pages that are ranking on the same SERP, that's more real estate for you. So in that case, I wouldn't try and fix that per se.
Got it. Maybe related to that, Atella asked a question. Are you seeing like longer form content, like ultimate guides perform better than shorter content? Is that something that you might need to think about in the refresh process?
I think it all depends on the SERP. So one of the things that people don't do enough is actually spend time on the SERP and look at what are the word counts for the top page one pages. I was going to say top 10, but again, sometimes only 7 results showing. What are the word counts? And then when you actually click into those pages, are they listicles? Are they landing pages? Is there a mix of homepage and blog? I think this is where the work comes in when it comes to hiring an SEO, and giving yourself the time to do that is ultimately going to save you time from going down the wrong path. So it's always really important to Google that main keyword, open up the different pages, and get a sense of what the intent is and what the format of those other pages are. And then if for example you have the choice to try to rank your homepage versus try to rank an inner page, there's different criteria and decisions that will factor into that as well, when you're deciding what to do.
Yeah, sometimes the best thing to do is not get a fancy tool, but just go into Google and SERPs and look at what's ranking there.
Well, I
And see
think
what
you
you
could
need to
do both.
optimize.
Like you're basically just qualifying that, right? So once
Right.
you've qualified that, you can add it to your list and then use fancy tools. But as a first pass, when you do notice that your rankings have dropped or a page has slipped, don't only look at dashboards within tools, but actually go to Google and try to get some answers, firsthand answers for yourself.
Yeah, perfect. Jose asked the question here, what if the rankings have remained stable, but clicks have declined?
That's a good question. I would say that, optimizing your title tag to increase the CTR in that case is probably, again, the first pass that you want to go through with that. But also, going to the SERP and seeing like, is an AIO responsible for that, or is there a different SERP feature that is responsible for that? Would also help you answer that question. But I think, looking at, in that case, updating the title tag would be my first method of attack there.
Yeah, that's great. That's definitely an easy win for sure. Well, we're about at time here. Thank you, Steve, so much. Really appreciate it. You can definitely follow Steve on LinkedIn and SEO Notebook, SEOnotebook.com. And then he is part of Notebook Agency. A must follow for sure on LinkedIn, a must subscription on SEOnotebook.com, and then a new one, AInotebook.com as well. So Steve is great at the newsletter game. Always, again, I said this at the top, very tactical, very usable things there. And then if you are interested in AirOps, we do have a few strategy sessions left. We'll share more about these workflows and how you can build that for your content team as well. So thanks, Steve. I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much. And with respect to AI Notebook, look forward in April.
Perfect. Perfect. Thanks, everyone. And check back in a few weeks. We will be having another great Growth Leaders series. So looking forward to seeing everyone soon.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for attending. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.